I want to start this video again by apologizing for how long it's taken to get this discussion out, as well as state that while I have researched this, I'm not saying that everything in this video will be 100% accurate. I try to draw logical conclusions from the material we are given. If you haven't already, be sure to watch the Datascapes discussion. The final discussion in this 3-part series will be about Worldlines, and then I can make a short video on the theory I have that involves these 3 subjects, if I still remember what it is. I want to preface this video with the following. Some of the topics in this video we do not have a lot of information on, so some of these speculations will be taking liberties in this discussion. With that said, I have tried to use ideas and concepts introduced in different Kingdom Hearts games to make these at least somewhat plausible. I also want to note that this discussion will not be using the character files that have been unofficially translated for 2 reasons. I'm not entirely trustworthy of fan translations, as much as I appreciate reading them, and these were not written by Nomura, but rather by the same person who wrote the light novels. I realize that they helped write Days, and that they work closely with Nomura. However, in the past, some of these writings have been disproven by the game lore. So with that being established, I think I will just ignore them until they have been proven by in-game sources. So, why discuss sleeping worlds? What is a sleeping world? Where does it reside? How does it interact with the universe that Kingdom Hearts has already set up? Well, we know sleep was introduced in Kingdom Hearts 1, right from the beginning. We see Sora waking up on Destiny Islands. The stations of awakening that most games start with are also shown to be part of sleep as well. This does open the door up about the differences between what is a dream and what is a sleeping world. So let's start with what is a sleeping world. Actually, there's a couple things I want to say before we get started. I recently created a Discord. It's not 100% set up, but if you guys want to hang out or chat, that will be available. I also am starting to stream more on Twitch, so if you haven't followed me there yet, I play mostly horror games and other random games. Finally, there will be spoiler territory ahead concerning Kingdom Hearts Remind, so take this as your warning. Let's start a discussion of what is a sleeping world at a place where the player is consciously introduced to this concept, Dream Drop Distance with Master Yen Sid. A sleeping world is a dreamlike state of that world when it has been swallowed by darkness, kind of like a defense mechanism in order to protect itself and those who reside in it, as he states that the denizens of that land are sound asleep, trapped within the world that is also asleep. It is unclear, however, how this entirely works though. We see Aqua traversing worlds that are in the Dark Realm, but these places are completely empty, devoid of life. This confused me for a bit until I found Aqua's line. She makes a comment, but where did the people that lived here go, once their world was taken away? At least they aren't here, so they haven't fallen to darkness. This isn't contradicting what Yen Sid has said. It is simply a different case, one where the people of that world escaped before it had fallen to darkness. In actuality, this world would still have a dream. It would just fill in the pieces that were missing, like Master Yen Sid said they would. According to him, once a world is swallowed by darkness, then it falls into a sleeping state and creates a dream. He also states that these worlds had fallen to darkness and Sora is the one that brought them back, and as a result, they were awoken from their slumber. We see this shown in 2.8 as Aqua watches Destiny Islands get carried back to the realm of light as she falls back into darkness. An interesting thing about this is when Aqua is staring up at the sky and it starts shifting and turning into night sky, it looks very reminiscent of the final world. This empty worldness is also seen in Kingdom Hearts 3 when Sora is using the power of waking to traverse each world's heart in order to find his friends. These worlds are seen to be in the process of being consumed by darkness, but they aren't 100% part of the realm of darkness. They are simply empty worlds filled with Heartless. We never see any of the worlds that Aqua sees as part of these sleeping worlds in Dream Drop Distance though. What's interesting is that there are 3 Princesses of Light's worlds that we are shown to have fallen to darkness in 2.8. Castle of Dreams, Dwarf Woodlands, and Enchanted Dominion. Why is this important though? Because we see these 3 Princesses of Light in Kingdom Hearts 1, so they escape from their worlds falling to darkness, so that means that other people might have as well. Which means that even though the world is devoid of life when it has fallen to darkness, this does not mean that it does not produce a dream. So why are the worlds we travel to in Dream Drop Distance referred to as sleeping worlds rather than dream worlds, or simply dreams? I find it rather confusing, but I believe that the naming is maybe a bit misleading, like many things in Kingdom Hearts. When Sora and Riku start off on Destiny Islands, that world soon is plunged into sleep while they are still on it. We see this as they fight against a phantom Ursula, something that seems to appear only within the Dark Realm, or a sleeping world, or dream. At first I thought that a sleeping world exists on the same plane as the dream, and the story section of Dream Drop Distance seems to indicate that this is true. The worlds we are traveling themselves are referred to as sleeping worlds. So while a sleeping world does dream and we interact with that dream, it's almost as if the dream of that world is on the same plane as that of the sleeping world. This would seem slightly different to how Sora dreams of the world as Riku traverses that, and how Sora traverses through the dream of the sleeping world. However, I believe that the world fallen to darkness exists in the Dark Realm, perhaps walled off from the Dark Realm so that the people sleeping are safe. From the way Master Yen Sid puts it though, it seems as if the world itself is walled off from the Dark Realm. Not even the Heartless can enter, but the world still fell to darkness. Another point to make is that in the story section of Kingdom Hearts 3D, it's stated that the Traverse Town Riku and Sora are in are both dreams, as pointed out by Joshua. I want to discuss this a little more, so before we enter the subtopic of how dreams of worlds and people line up, let's go over some more minor points I'd like to make about sleeping worlds and Kingdom Hearts 3D. Where does the story of Kingdom Hearts 3D take place? It's somewhat convoluted until you map it out, and even then, this is still somewhat difficult to follow. However, we know two things: that Sora travels in the dreams of the sleeping worlds, and that Riku travels through Sora's dreams of that world. This is presented to us as fact from Master Yen Sid, and somewhat backed up by Ansem and the world that never was. I say the last one with a bit of hesitation, as they are seemingly saying the opposite of what is fact the entire game. However, this tidbit of information is supported by Master Yen Sid, so I find this statement factual. We see Sora and Riku on Destiny Islands at the beginning of the game, and then a phantom Ursula appears and fights them, being cast into the waters and then entering their first sleeping world. I wanted to point out that this was a phantom Ursula, since this name is seen to be flung about rather often. In Kingdom Hearts 2.8, we see Phantom Aqua, a potential manifestation of the darkness within Aqua's heart, and again in Kingdom Hearts 3, where the pieces of Sora are referred to as phantoms in-game. These are both seen in the Dark Realm, at least the Mirror World, and the Final World. So a Phantom Ursula is not unheard of, but it does seem odd that she seems to have some foreknowledge, since she seemingly hasn't met them yet. But if she is referred to as a phantom, I wonder what traits these phantoms share. Sora is referred to as spectral, according to the story section of 3D, when he is seen while we play as Riku. Spectral is also another word for phantom, so this could be more related. Finally, in Traverse Town they are referred to as projections in the story section, which I find very interesting, and you can check out my previous video on datascapes where we discuss that more. Side tangent aside, it seems that they start their journey in either a separate world line of events that have happened, or are simply continuing at a point in time they existed at prior. I will go more into this concept later in this video, however the main point here is that they are still in the real world at this point. Near the end of the game, we see that Sora is put into a sleep when he exits into the world that never was, which he states is the real world. And we see that Riku sees a spectral form of Sora within this world, which is Sora's dream. This is what confused me the most, how Riku is seeing Sora sleeping if he was already within his dream. However, the story section of the world that never was seems to indicate that Sora is only being projected here. Kind of, but not entirely similar to how we see them interacting in Traverse Town. Riku then exits Sora's dream into the real world, and then Mickey and the gang arrive, and then they appear back at the tower. We know first off that Riku is still in the dream when he arrives, since the Kingdom Hearts heart is still filled in the sky above. But when Sora arrives and when Riku exits, we do not see the fabricated Kingdom Hearts in the sky. This would then indicate that A, since there is no heart, we can conclude that they are no longer in the dream, as well as B, they are not back in time, since if they were, the heart would at least be there, or smaller. So they seem to be in the current world that never was. What is rather puzzling though is their forms. They don their younger appearance, or at least their sleeping world clothing and appearance. But when they arrive back at the tower, they are again older. How is this the case? I think this needs to be shelved and discussed later in this video. One minor point that people have said about sleeping worlds is the fact that Sora doesn't seem to have any issue traveling underwater or breathing. However, I would argue that he simply follows the laws of that world. In Atlantica, he is turned into an aquatic animal in order to blend in and breathe underwater. In Jokester's Paradise, Jiminy and Pinocchio both are seen to be breathing and walking underwater, which would mean that Sora would have this kind of ability as well, right? Many people try to point out that Sora can breathe underwater in the sleeping world, and that he seemingly has the same ability in the pirate's world, and in the last fight in Kingdom Hearts 3, that these must be the same place. That Kingdom Hearts 3 must be taking place in the sleeping worlds. However, I would argue that they are seeing more of the same thing here. Also, the lady whispers to Sora that if he helps her, she'd give him all the power of the sea. We could interpret this as when Sora received the ability to breathe underwater, Or we could insinuate that the magic or order Donald talks about helped in this situation as well. Either way, the fact that Sora can breathe underwater in different worlds, being sleeping or otherwise, does not make a case that this entire game takes place in a sleeping world. It should be also noted that Sora has full mobility underwater in Prankster's Paradise, but very limited in Kingdom Hearts 3, which would further corroborate that the physics Pinocchio and Jiminy share are also something Sora would have. Also, the fact that Sora said they didn't have any warning before the ship was plunged underwater may also give credence to it being Donald's magic that allows them to breathe underwater, which means Donald didn't have time to do what he needed to conjure the magic to breathe underwater. When a world sleeps, it generates a dream. When a person sleeps, they also generate a dream. So then, are there any differences between these dreams that are created from different entities? Well, what if they aren't too different? What if I told you that dreams actually come from hearts? Let's explore this a little. In most of the Kingdom Hearts games, we see these odd stained glass pedestals, or as I believe they will move on to be, discs. These are more than likely physical representations of one's heart, referenced by Chirithy to be stations of awakening. And we see this as confirmation when Ventus's heart is crumbling away in Birth by Sleep after Vanitas is stripped from his heart. We also know that these stations of awakening are in fact tangible, since we have several instances where other characters visit people's different stations. For instance, when Riku dives into Sora's heart, he lands and fights on Sora's pedestal. In Kingdom Hearts 3, Yozora summons Sora's station. In Kingdom Hearts 2 Encoded, Roxas appears to fight Sora on his station, and in Birth by Sleep, we see Sora's heart visit Ventus's station. Where else do we see these though? In Kingdom Hearts 3, when Sora is falling through a dark abyss and into these stations of awakening. I want to also note that Jiminy calls these stained glass discs portals, a word that Joshua uses in 3D to explain travel between dreams. Where do these exist though? Chirithy indicates that when Sora dives to the Station of Awakening, he's actually diving into his dream. I want to make a point about this, but I'll group this in a different category later in this video since it makes more sense in that context. Moving on, another small indication that hearts of people in worlds are more similar is the fact that the defensive mechanism in place seems to be that of falling asleep. Ventus's heart falls asleep to protect Ventus from his heart completely shattering, and a world does the same when it is falling to darkness. So now that we've established the similarities and common grounds of dreams, why do Sora's dream of the world end up being so different from the dream of the world? Well, this should be a little bit obvious, but Sora's dream is his interpretation of the experiences he would have with this world, whereas the dream of the world would have its own interpretation. However, why does Riku experience things in people that Sora doesn't? I thought maybe at first that maybe these dreams could just be previous encounters Sora had, like with Mastro's world, but Sora hasn't visited any other world prior to this except Traverse Town and the world that never was. The only explanation I can come up with is when Master Young Sid said that the sleeping world would fill in the blanks, but this also feels like a stretch. On the same note of not particularly making any sense is the fact that Riku and Sora can interact on the same plane. Riku saves Sora from a box falling on him. However, it is still somewhat murky how this is able to be done. Similarly, Riku and Sora are able to see each other in Traverse Town, along with the World Ends With You crew when talking with Joshua. An interesting anecdote with these members is that it seems to imply that young Xehanort gave them a timer, and they also refer to him as a Reaper. Anyways, both of these instances, among the others that happen, I would explain with, yet again, Master Young Sid's words. He states that time does not flow regularly in the sleeping worlds. Thus, if time is not exactly linear in this place, does that mean that interactions on any level all happen at the same time? I will discuss the aspect of time in a separate video, for which I apologize, but this video is just taking too long in the first place with that topic as well intermixed with this. I feel like I can do it proper justice in a separate video. Interestingly enough, Aqua states the same thing in the Realm of Darkness, but we will discuss that further along in the topic of where are sleeping worlds. I want to make one final point in this subsection about dream portals. In the end of 3D, we see Sora asleep and Riku entering his dreams. Sora stays in this top layer though from what we are aware of, while Riku dives entirely into Sora's dream. When Riku dives further into Sora's heart, we realize that Riku is still within Sora's dream, even though he's awoken. In Kingdom Hearts 3, however, it seems like when we enter Xehanort's dream, or Link Portal, he as well gets sucked in instead of staying on the outside. We have some credence that this is still a dream, since we know that the person doesn't have to be asleep for a dream to exist. What is interesting though is that when Xehanort dies, wouldn't his dream dissipate at that point? This then begs the question, does each dream of a person continue on as a world? Is the dream of a person a world? If it is, then it would have its own heart, and if that's the case, it could exist when a person is not dreaming or when they have passed away. We have seen worlds and datascapes have hearts, so doesn't this lend some credence to dreams having their own heart? And then wouldn't the name sleeping worlds make more sense? We know that for a sleeping world to emerge, that world has to have a heart. We discussed in my datascapes video how the grid is a dream of the datascape that existed before it was deleted. An attribute of datascapes, though, were that memories seem to persist. However, in dreams, that doesn't necessarily seem to be the case. The grid is a dream, and we see Tron not remember Sora at first, but then Sora reaches out for his hand near the end. This version of Tron, though, would have never met Sora, just shared code with the copied Tron from the future. In Prankster's Paradise, Jiminy doesn't recognize Sora, but then says the name sounds familiar and that Sora has him almost thinking they know each other. Mickey, Donald, and Goofy, some of the strongest ties to Sora's heart, don't recognize him in the Musketeers world, although Goofy seems to make some offhanded comment about maybe he does. So this seems almost contradictory. However, it would almost seem to be more like Yen Sid explains, that the dreams are only figments of the dream, and the datascapes are created from the data of memories and hearts. Finally, from my previous video, what we know about Kingdom Hearts Union Cross as of right now, I think it's very possible that Kingdom Hearts Union Cross is a sleeping world of a deleted datascape of Daybreak Town. Or at least parts of it. We saw in a recent update where the Master of Masters showed Lushu this massive computer room, and then we had the Dandelion leaders discussing where they are at, wherein Brain states that they are most likely in a datascape. However, I would argue that Ava is teaching them to travel to a sleeping world, which potentially could have been a deleted datascape, much like that of the grid. I wanted to expound upon this a bit more, just to iron it out a little bit. We're told by Master Yen Sid that a sleeping world is created when a world is falling to darkness, wherein it is supposedly cut off from all outside channels, where not even the Heartless can enter. So when does this transition happen? When does a world become a sleeping world? When we are following the Lich, we are traversing these empty worlds, almost like how Aqua roams the empty worlds in the Realm of Darkness. The Lich is like the Dreameater in 3D. It beckons Sora down to the depths of darkness, and the Dreameater makes Sora go further into the sleeping worlds, both seemingly having ulterior motives for this leadership role. If these sleeping worlds are cut off, though, no Heartless should exist here, right? Well, when we dive into Xehanort's supposed dream, there exist Heartless and Nobodies. So is this argument valid anymore? Even in 3D, if the Guardian is a Heartless, then why is it within the sleeping worlds? It's hard to say, but I think maybe Yen Sid is potentially wrong about this fact. Or at least things have changed, or there are exemptions. For instance, in our Stations of Awakening, there are more times than not Heartless and Nobody existing in this plane. But Chirithy states that these are dreams, so according to the knowledge we have, they shouldn't be allowed here, correct? It's stated in Kingdom Hearts that within every heart exists darkness, and if we are diving to our heart, then it makes sense for Heartless to exist there. This is a theory, but we see Riku opening Sora's heart with a sleeping keyhole, and then he dives into Sora's dreams. Then could this be similar to Xehanort? If we're entering Xehanort's dream in this manner, a layer deeper into a Station of Awakening, then that must mean that a sleeping keyhole was not needed to be unlocked, which means that potentially the darkness in his heart has access to his dream world. Moving back to when the worlds are falling to darkness though, in Kingdom Hearts 3, this seems to be the transitioning point in my opinion. They are falling to darkness, thus they are probably creating these sleeping worlds as we traverse through them. Again, I haven't found much info on when this happens, so if you have any insight, please let me know in the comments. It's hard to pinpoint where exactly sleeping worlds exist. Master Yen Sid mentions the Realm of Sleep after Riku again dives into Sora's dreams, but in Kingdom Hearts 3, it still only states that there are 3 realms: light, darkness, and between. So let's dive into the idea that it exists somewhere in these 3 first before exploring the possibility of a separate 4th realm. Let's start with the Realm of Light. This could be easily debunked since we are told real time does not pass in the sleeping worlds, where in the Realm of Light, there seems to be a consistent time that is passing that is viewable to the characters as well as the audience. Secondly, the worlds seemingly fall to darkness before they fall to sleep. So this seems to indicate that if anything, they would be in the Realm of Darkness. Well, before we discuss that further, what about the Realm Between? Yen Sid says Ventus's heart is sleeping and the place between light and darkness. Then he says the only way to get back is if he finds a friend to bring him back to the Realm of Light. We've seen how dreams parallel between people and worlds, almost as if anything with a heart is able to conjure up a dream. So like Ventus, are the sleeping worlds sleeping in the Realm Between? If this were the case though, it's stated in the glossary of Kingdom Hearts 3 that the Realm of Light and the Realm Between both exist within the same sea of stars. Sora and the others would not need any reason to jump through hoops in order to visit these worlds if this were the case. On a slight side note, in Birth by Sleep, Terra and Aqua say in the beginning that every star in the sky is a world, which parallels to the world being brought back from the darkness in the end of Kingdom Hearts 1, as Kairi watches the stars light up the sky. These stars would be the sea that the realm of light and between exist in. Sora states, as we are traveling the worlds in a final world-esque setting called the End of the World, if we do beat him and all these worlds become restored and disconnected, and confirmed by Aqua when she is laying on the Destiny Islands and says, they did it, the worlds are being restored. In Kingdom Hearts 3, when we are mapping the keyholes together, are they supposed to represent worlds since they make a constellation at the end? Or is this something unknown to the player yet? Is this what allows the worlds to then connect if they have truly become disconnected? Anyways, there are some interesting aspects to the realm between though, being how interconnected it seems to be with the realm of light and darkness. Goofy says the end of the world is a heartless world. So is this world that has been separated from its form like a heartless and a nobody? Then would that mean that a dream of that world exists? Would that mean maybe that's where the final world came from? A dream of this world that is at its end? Castle Oblivion is seen to be in the realm between that can be reached through the end of the world at the end of Kingdom Hearts 1. The place where we see the most in the realm of darkness is actually a place in the realm between and the realm of darkness, where the water is the darkness and the beach between, in an interview with Nomura. So while the realm between is very odd in what it can hold and what paths are within it, it does seem that it is too accessible to Sora to be holding the sleeping worlds. Let's move back to the realm of darkness with this quote from the Kingdom Hearts 3 glossary. The realm of darkness, however, exists in a space closed off from time. It is accessible only via dark corridors, pathways that open up for the agents of darkness, or when worlds become unstable, or by using the power of waking. It exists in a space closed off from time, which seems to correlate very well with what Master Yen Sid states, that real time does not flow in the sleeping worlds. Just as the realm of light and between share a sea of planets, is it not the case that the realm of darkness could also share with another space? I would argue then that the sleeping worlds are part of the realm of darkness. Notice that the glossary mentions that the power of waking can be used to enter the realm of darkness. But do we ever see Riku, Mickey, or Sora using this power of waking to enter and exit this realm? Well, we've actually seen Sora at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3 use the power of waking to exit from San Francisco, where it is unclear if this is a sleeping world or a world fallen to darkness. More so, this entry is written before Sora uses it to get back to the Keyblade graveyard, indicating to me that the only place this would be used would be when Sora and Riku were using them in Dream Drop Distance. This will be brought up again below in an upcoming topic. This is my opinion, but when they refer to the realm of sleep, I believe this would just be within the realm of darkness. Time seems to match up, as well as terms of travel to and from. So then, do the sleeping worlds exist within the dark realm? Or do only the worlds exist and the dreams are attached into another layer in the realm of darkness, or in a sub-realm within the realm of darkness, potentially being called the realm of sleep? Mickey is said to be unable to reach Sora and Riku, but it seems more like this is more of a location issue, as Yen Sid states, "Where will you go?" But it is prefaced by, "You cannot enter the dream of a world." However, this could be interpreted as the same as the location issue, not the fact that he cannot physically enter the sleeping worlds. This is also what Master Yen Sid says of the Heartless. However, we have seen this not to be the case. Yen Sid also gives a slight nod to Mickey using the power of waking when Yen Sid states he found Riku and that he should trust his heart to find him. Also, this would mean that Sora and Riku have traveled through time all the way back to the present day, however, in less time when they began, seeing as their bodies have not aged past their adolescent stage when they first began. This would parallel Aqua being in the realm of darkness for 10 years but not aging at all, and the fact that time passes and the person either is not aware how quickly or slowly it goes, and the fact that they do not age past their stage when they entered. From what can be gathered from context clues, in the instance of Riku and Sora though, it does not seem like an entire year has passed, maybe up to a week at most in my opinion. Another indication that these realms share space is when Mickey says that a way into the realm of darkness opens in the realm between when a world is being consumed. This is kind of similar to how to access a sleeping world it seems, except that it seems to be in the realm of darkness where the sleeping keyhole can be opened. Another thing that we touched on above are the Stations of Awakening. Terra's Station of Awakening protects Sora after he fights Terranort, and this disc seems to appear from within the darkness. This would then seem to indicate that these stations are within the realm of darkness. And this kind of makes sense as well when we see Ansem talking about hearts in Kingdom Hearts 1. Finally, the Dream Portal shards seem to be popping up all over Kingdom Hearts 3, but with things aligned with darkness. For instance, with Dark Form, when you unleash its finisher, the 8 points can be seen as he slams his Keyblade down. Another cameo is in the fight against Data Young Xehanort, where he sends the ice projectiles at you. Does this mean there is a relationship between sleep and darkness, or rather, the realm of darkness? Now, two of the most confusing pieces of information I feel in this game is the location of where Sora and Riku are and the entire "Are we still in a dream?" in the realm between. Mickey watches over Sora and Riku anxiously as they complete the Mark of Mastery exam. Donald is with the King and Goofy, keeping an eye on Sora and Riku as they take the Mark of Mastery exam. Right now, Goofy, the King, and Donald are keeping an eye on Sora and Riku as they take the Mark of Mastery exam. These character files are interesting to me because it seems like they are physically watching over them. With what we know about time travel, you have to leave your body behind and travel as your heart. So this makes sense why they would suddenly appear older again if their hearts returned. But Sora's won't be able to return in the state he is in now. However, what we just discussed above, I would argue is the case. Now, while I say that this is the only form of time travel, we know that there are a couple other versions, but I'm going to save that for our time discussion video. Some signs like Dreameaters still being here and Riku still having a sigil seem to point to it being in a dream. But then things like the fake Kingdom Hearts appear. But at this point, when Mickey and the gang are coming to the rescue, it should be destroyed. So using that as a point of reference, it seems likely that Riku's first entrance to this world is still within Sora's dream. But when he pops out, it seems he's in the real world as the moon is no longer there. Some may also ask where Sora is in all of this. I would say Sora is within the dream, and then when we see him fall asleep within his own dream is when he falls to a deeper sleep, which is why young Xehanort talks to Sora like he is in fact in another dream. Now, I did mention that we would discuss this fourth realm, the realm of sleep. With all the evidence above, I would argue that if a realm of sleep does exist, it exists in conjunction with the realm of darkness, as the realm of light and between share. There are some in-game quotes that do seem to refer to there being this realm, however. Yen Sid in 3D does mention the realm of sleep when talking with Riku at the end of the game. Sora was sent to the dreaming realm and there awoke according to the story so far in the story section for the Mysterious Tower. Young Xehanort mentions the realm of dreams in the grid when he is trying to convince him that he is not in a dream, whereas we know that Sora is indeed still in the dream. Finally, Unchained Key talks about this heavily, the mobile game that prefaced Kingdom Hearts Union Cross. Or Union Chi. Or Key. I don't know, there's too many names. When we see Ava, she talks about Ephemer in an unchained state and in a different realm, and then discusses how he is able to enter our dream. So to me, this evidence would indicate that there does exist this realm. However, I feel like it's more like the light and between realms, where darkness and sleep share a realm. Dreameaters are a very interesting form of darkness. Yes, darkness. Yensei refers to both types of Dreameaters as darkness, nightmares, and spirits. This may be yet another nod to the realm of sleep existing within the realm of darkness. What are Dreameaters, though? In simplest terms from Yen Sid, nightmares devour dreams, and spirits devour those nightmares, thus protecting those who dream. They seem to be yet another byproduct of the Master of Masters. Why do I say another? Well, the Master of Masters seems to be attributed, by Ira, to be the one that initially bequeathed everyone their Keyblades. This, however, can be interpreted differently to mean only his apprentices. And when he creates Chirithy, a Dreameater that is actually probably more a type of Dreameater rather than Chirithy being its name due to how many copies there seem to be, this could be him creating the first Dreameaters, or simply using the knowledge he gained from studying sleeping worlds to create his own. It's unclear the origins of either of these, but he does seem to have a level of control and insight into this universe than any other character. We see Sora and Riku do similar as they create Dreameaters from different kinds of materials in 3D. They, however, are shown to be informed by both Neku and Yen Sid. Riku has his spirit Dreameater symbol embroidered on his clothing. However, it does not look the same as that of Chirithy or other spirits' emblems. Riku's, I think, is more symbolic. He is not a copy or different entity than that of his original form. However, he does protect Sora as he travels through his dreams, defeating the nightmares. Riku does, however, say that he has these Dreameater powers due to Sora being still asleep, which I honestly am not entirely sure what he means by this. With our discussion of perception in my Datascapes video, what's interesting is that there exists a Dreameater that can alter its form, or rather what it is perceived to be. The confusing thing about Dreameaters is that they seem to be tied to the sleeping worlds from 3D's story. However, we see that Chirithy is created in what is seemingly the real Daybreak Town, and we see these spirits and nightmares in the world that never was, which we also agree some pieces are in the real world. Much like how the Heartless are denizens of the realm of darkness, but can exist within the realm of light, I believe this to be the case with Dreameaters, and we touched on it before, but even though Yen Sid states that Heartless cannot enter the sleeping worlds, I believe this to be just a misunderstanding on his part. Ansem and Xemnas both enter the sleeping worlds, but only because Sora and Riku entered through the sleeping keyhole. It's never stated that nobodies cannot exist within the sleeping worlds, though I assume maybe Yen Sid meant this as well. Either way, as we discussed before, the conclusion here seems to be that any denizen can exist in any realm. There exist several different ways, it seems, to traverse a sleeping world. In 3D and Kingdom Hearts 3, we see that these things are referred to as link portals. These portals are represented as a center sphere with crystal-looking diamonds jutting out from it from different symmetrical angles. In 3D, battle portals look like all the portals that the player can interact with, pink and somewhat translucent. In Kingdom Hearts 3, however, the battle portals take on a blue look and don the name of battle gates, while the portals to the final world and Skalad Kylum are pink. In Joshua's case, the physical portal he refers to is Rhyme. However, the physical manifestation of his portal is a yellow dream portal that holds Traverse Town within it. In the world that never was, there seems to be a purple portal that takes you back to the sleeping worlds. In the end of Kingdom Hearts 3D, a pink portal is seen with dark clouds as Riku enters Sora's portal, which was him entering Sora's slumber. We see a portal being created from Xehanort as well in Kingdom Hearts 3, which is how Sora is able to traverse to Skalad Kylum. In the Kingdom Hearts universe, we've already seen several different types of link portals, and they can appear in and outside of wherever sleeping worlds reside. Joshua's seem different, being the only one that was a yellow color that was supposedly generated from Rhyme. The ones that we see that Sora enters from the Realm of Light are in blue and pink, one that transports him to a different arena and has enemies for him to fight, and one that seems to send him to the final world and Skalad Kylum, both supposedly dreams. If the colors are what defines the nature of the portal, can we then assume that pink link portals lead to sleeping worlds as well as dreams? The only thing Master Xehanort states about Scala is of all the places to be sent. We have only seen him here when he was a boy, but this would mean part of him exists here so he is able to travel back in time to this point. However, the fact that everyone else is able to travel here would indicate the opposite, which also shows us a different way of traversing sleeping worlds, the power of waking. This world seems to be devoid of life at first, except for the Xehanort replicas, which is reminiscent of Aqua and Sora's travels to worlds fallen and falling to darkness, meaning that it very well could be swallowed by darkness, and if it was swallowed by darkness, then it could be a sleeping world. If this is a sleeping world, then it contradicts a statement made by Master Yen Sid, where he states that not even the Heartless can enter the sleeping worlds, which I know I've brought that point up a billion times at this point. But we see a plethora of different Heartless as well as nobodies in Remind. We see Ansem as well as Xemnas traveling with young Xehanort, and these people were at one point considered Heartless and nobody. Although at this point in time, I believe they would have hearts in which to transcend time with the use of replicas, thus separating them from this category. A different way to traverse sleeping worlds seems to be corridors of darkness that young Xehanort is seen using to keep tabs on Sora and Riku. Young Xehanort, and by extension Xemnas and Ansem, are able to travel through the sleeping worlds because they have a tracker on Sora. They know exactly where he is. And I have to wonder if this is how they are able to travel and find Sora, whereas Yen Sid says it's impossible to Mickey. The recusant sigil is the name for this tracking device. This X is known as the recusant sigil, and has manifested itself in both obvious and insidious ways throughout Sora's adventures. We also see this shown when Ira summons Chirithy, its name holding the symbol thus having the ability to be tracked. In much the same way, Xemnas uses the symbol in all his subjects, and in Kingdom Hearts 3 when he summons the key, as do Xion, Lee, and Roxas when they recover it. Young Xehanort is using these dark corridors to even traverse deeper into Sora's dreams to meet up with Riku. Joshua also points out that Riku did not travel with a portal, but rather Riku and Sora both travel to these sleeping worlds through sleeping keyholes. Before segueing into sleeping keyholes, Sora and Riku seem to enter into the sleeping worlds with their entire body intact. However, at the end, we see Sora sleeping within himself, but his body present in the realm of light, and we also see Riku waking up as the gang are watching over him even though he went into Sora's dreams. Kind of like Kingdom Hearts 1 Sora on Destiny Islands. We also see Riku within his dream as well in Kingdom Hearts 3 Limit Cut, which I think this also is broken down into two ways to enter the sleeping worlds, or dreams. It seems that you can either physically enter the dream with your physical body, or you seem to mentally project yourself inside of your dream while your body remains in the real world. In the case of Riku, I assume when he pops out of Sora through the sleeping keyhole is when his body reappears in the real world and he then wakes up from exiting. Expanding on what we discussed above and what is a sleeping world subtopics, something interesting is that we see Sora entering these worlds' hearts. He is seemingly transported to the location of that heart. I don't know whether this means he is diving into these worlds' dreams, but the worlds are desolate and empty, which to me means more so that these are still the real versions of the worlds. Contrastingly, we see Riku use a sleeping keyhole to gain access to something within Sora's Station of Awakening. Whether this is Sora's innermost dream or sleeping world, I'm not entirely sure. Now, if we parallel what Joshua said to Riku when they first met, there does seem to be two ways to traverse sleeping worlds, using a portal and using a sleeping keyhole. So both of these ways that Sora and Riku use may both be saying that they are traversing sleeping worlds. And also the third way to traverse would be the dark corridors, which would make it align more closely to the Realm of Darkness from the glossary entry. When Sora goes through a sleeping keyhole, we see this drop sequence in the ending credits scene. When we see them exit a world, we are taken to the map selection screen and then select a world, which looks like a dream portal without the parts sticking out, and then the drop sequence initiates. And even when Riku enters Sora's dream portal, we see him dropping as well. In Kingdom Hearts 3, when Sora leaves the final world through a sleeping keyhole, he is also seen flying through these rays of light. Whether this means that all sequences that show these rays of light indicate some kind of dream travel, I don't know. Now Yensid sends Sora and Riku to travel to these 7 sleeping keyholes. Yensid states that these would correlate to the 7 pure lights. 3 of these princesses, I believe, have had their worlds lost to darkness for some time. The Dwarf Woodlands, Enchanted Dominion, and the Castle of Dreams. The first time we see these are back in Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, and then again in Birth by Sleep. But then we see their princesses in Kingdom Hearts 1 in Hollow Bastion, but not their worlds. I had to think that somehow we would be traveling to specific worlds, but instead we were tossed to Traverse Town. Something that we are told about this place is that it kind of appears when most needed. And if Sora and Riku are being derailed, then this would be the perfect place for them to end up at first, and then continue along the winding path that young Xehanort led them down. I believe the sleeping keyholes function as 2 separate things. 1, as doorways to traverse through, and 2, a familiar tool that teaches the ones that unlock them how to use the power of waking. We must lead them out of sorrow and slumber and back to our world. To do so, 7 sleeping keyholes must be found and unlocked, and a great power retrieved. Meaning that the power of waking is used to waken sleeping worlds or hearts, not simply opening the keyholes. We also see that sleeping keyholes are not limited to simply the sleeping worlds. We see Sora travel through these to the final world from the Keyblade Graveyard, and to Traverse Town from the Mysterious Tower. However, these are both opening pathways to sleeping worlds or dreams. So it does seem to be linked to traversal to and from sleeping worlds and dreams, but you can access them from either side. And the last point I want to make actually moves us into our last topic. With the Symphony of Sorcery, we see that the Mysterious Tower is supposedly dreaming. How can this be the case though? Well, in the end of 3D, we get a new animation for the world, which to me indicates that they are separating these 2 instances of the world. What could explain this? Worldlines. Above, we discussed how Sora and Riku travel to their past bodies and go on from there to enter the sleeping worlds and so on. However, if they were possessing their current bodies, wouldn't that muddy the timeline? It does not seem as if time stops and they do the mastery test and then return the bodies. It almost seems like these are their bodies, just de-aged. However, they seem to make a callback to the 2 lines Sora and Riku say in the beginning of Kingdom Hearts 1, so I believe this is them trying to imply they sent their hearts back in time, but then these couldn't be from the same world line. But we'll discuss that more in my next video. In the last 2 worlds that we go to, Country of the Musketeers and the Symphony of Sorcery, things seem a bit off. Both include Mickey, but he doesn't seem to recognize us, and even they seem to be at different points in time. Character file states King Mickey back while he was still in training, indicating that these 2 are the same Mickey. But does that mean it is our Mickey? In Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, it seems to be possible to travel from a datascape or a dream to a different world line, as told by Luciu in the Secret Reports of Kingdom Hearts 3. I think this may be what this unchained state Ava stated might mean. Obviously not entirely clear, but if we are unchained, it might mean we can hop between world lines as we please. We aren't chained down to one instance. In the Musketeer world, especially, we see Pete with a wooden leg, where our Pete doesn't seem to have this, and even more interesting is that Pluto has a red collar rather than his normal green one. These versions of Donald and Goofy seem to not be the same as well, Donald lacking any kind of magic, and Goofy being quite timid and not cut out for guard duty. Although, if this is in the past, this could be logical. All of this seems to indicate that maybe things aren't entirely what they seem to be. Now, in the writing of this, Remind came out and definitely gave us a lot more questions, especially with Yozora. Before I get to that though, there are a couple things that I wanted to touch on that didn't necessarily fit it elsewhere in the script. Firstly, how does Sora exist within his and others' hearts, in Remind? He seems to not be physically present, showing how Ventus passes right through him, yet he's able to battle against other Heartless and Nobodies, Terranort, and even against the 13 Xehanorts at the end. Is this showing how time travel works? That because he didn't act at that one moment, he couldn't change that? Now, I know the Chirithy character file has a lot of good information there, but I just can't bring myself to use it, as well as Terra's character file, which he does mention a realm of sleep and then a realm of nothingness, which I find interesting. But again, I feel like they aren't canon, so I'm going to leave them out of this discussion still. And finally, Yozora's Night Sky world and Data Sora inside Riku's datascape seem eerily similar. Thanks to Zetsume for pointing this out to me, like, I totally missed that. Although, after reviewing it, it does seem more like the final world has like an ocean and stars, while the datascape is only stars, which honestly could have a lot of ramifications, because if Nomura is saying that darkness is water, maybe the stars or the sky is the dreams. Even that there does exist some kind of time passage in the final world wherein it turns to night and then back to day after the match. What's interesting too is the fact that Yozora seemingly summoned Sora's Station of Awakening to battle upon, before either manipulating the dream to summon a version of Shibuya, or using data somehow. Finally, and I would argue that this is the most important bit, when we are fighting Yozora, he spawns triangles that manipulate the background. In 2.8 with Aqua, we see these same triangles in the Dark Realm and the Mirror World, which is also where Aqua's phantoms appear. And I believe in Final Fantasy 13-2 or Lightning Returns, we see these same kind of like perception discs along the walls, and I'll show you what I mean. If we argue that this mirror is a portal, is it possible that Aqua traveled to a sleeping world or dream at this instant? It's all very unclear, but I assume we'll be shown in time what this means. For this video, I don't think I'm going to do an end card like normal. My brain is just so fried from working on this for months that I'd rather just give my brain a break and do a podcast at a later date where I can grab maybe some more people's questions in the comments of this video and discuss those as well as my own. But anyways, thank you guys so much for waiting. I really do appreciate that. I don't think the Worldlines video will take as long as this one. I've also recently started streaming on Twitch, not very regularly, but if you'd like to give me a follow there, that'd be great. I want to dump these notes at the end as well for anyone curious. Aqua uses flow motion here, however, she has only traversed the realm of darkness, either making this a point to refute that Kingdom Hearts 3 is a sleeping world because Sora can utilize his power, or a point to say that the realm of darkness and the sleeping worlds are more connected. Also, this is a spoiler for Final Fantasy VII Remake, so I'll give you a second before I continue. In the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, we see the party in what looks like to be the final world for a split second. It blew my mind when I was playing it, and I figured this video was a good way to get that info out there, but I couldn't really find a spot that seemed like a good segue into it. And finally, another Final Fantasy crossover. In the Final Fantasy 15 Platinum demo, we are seen fighting in nightmares. And at the end, we step on a panel of Awakening, which I think pairs Yozora, Noctis, and Sora together much more closely. I also want to give a huge shout out to Poltergeist for letting me use these soundtracks that you guys hear in the backgrounds of my videos. And a massive thanks to Kimchu. He has helped me loads with all the overlays, especially for my Twitch, but also my YouTube, my banners. He's made my intros with the sleeping worlds and the datascapes. So yeah, please go follow him on Twitter. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks again.